Let me ask you now, like when you see a handsome man like me, you don't feel your heart beating, for example?
Are you going to answer him?
No.
Did you listen to the Hot Breakfast this morning? Here's what you missed.
Today we have live is Yvonne Muthoni. She calls herself a proud African queer feminist, and she is the country director for Open for Business, an organization making the case that inclusive, diverse societies are better for cities, business, and economic growth. So we're talking about the LGBTIQ society. Are they being included? Are they being excluded? How about remarks the other day by a cabinet secretary saying that boarding schools, they're going to ban all homosexuals?
I feel like the professor sometimes says some unprofessor-like things.
Unprofessional. I wonder what Yvonne Muthoni thinks about that. Yvonne, welcome to Hot 96.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you very much.
How do you feel about that whole situation where children who are in the LGBTIQ, what does the TIQ, transgender, and IQ means what?
Intersex and queer.
Oh yes, back in the day, just would be LGB. Cindy,
Yeah.
You guys just keep adding things every year. LGBTIQRSTU.
Yeah, I mean, when someone says we're going to kick homosexual children out of boarding school, when you have a name like Magoha or Matiangi or Dinga, those kids are not going to be kicked out of school. He can close his eyes and pick a boarding school, and even if they stand up and say, hey, I'm either lesbian or gay or bisexual, those people are still going to go to those boarding schools. So it's the Mwananchi who will suffer. It's the Mwananchi who will be kicked out because you don't have that political or economical power to negotiate for your child to stay in school. But then it's also, what are you saying that if I'm a parent who wants my child to go to school and I'm too busy to have this child, let's say at home, my child cannot go to boarding school simply because they identify in a certain way? It's very unconstitutional. It's very backward, and it's denying a child their basic right to education, which this government has actually promised. So it's quite a sad situation. It's quite...
Do you feel like there's... Because I wonder, do these kids come out of the closet early in life, like 17, 18, during the admission, they say, and by the way, I'm also from this community. Like, how does that become relevant when looking for schools or jobs?
So coming out is really a personal thing, and it depends on how welcoming the environment is, how your parents are with you, especially when you're at a young age. So it depends on how your parents speak about these issues, how they tolerate these issues. Coming out as an adult is also a personal thing. What happens is, especially at the workplace, is that I'm excluded as a person who either identifies as a lesbian or a gay man or a bisexual. I'm excluded from things like insurance, where I can't cover my partner if a cover is being offered for me and my family. So I can't bring on my partner as a person I can cover. Then it's also about company feeling that inclusion, feeling, when you're at work, when you feel that you're part of the team, you're more productive. And those are some of the issues that our report touches on. That you lose some of your productivity when you feel that you're not being appreciated as who you are at work.
But do you feel like you should be, as a community, should be telling people about your sexuality? Like, if I'm heterosexual and I like women's company a lot, but no one discriminates because I like more than one woman, for example. But no one also knows that. I don't bring it up, and I can't do jobo. I can't talk on the radio because people will not accept me because I like maybe 14 girls.
But
am I making sense?
A very conservative society at the same time. So coming out would be very difficult, wouldn't it?
It is very difficult.
Why do you need to come out?
Because of the systems that are in place, because of laws that are in place that are used to discriminate. Some people cannot hide. Let's say if a person is transgender, they need medical attention, so they cannot hide that. So naturally and organically, you're out already, so to speak. But it's also about if, let's say, I am living with my partner. We're living together in the same house. My partner decides, we're getting a child. Let's say, for example, I'm just giving a very wide example, wide example. I cannot take sort of maternity or paternity leave because I was not pregnant, right? But this is a right for the heterosexual community. But apart from that, because the issues are so wide, apart from that, it's more of the assumption is always that you're heterosexual, right? So no one is going to bother you or ask you, and there's no need to come out because the assumption is already you're heterosexual. When you walk around, all the billboards, it's always, if it's a couple, it's always a heterosexual couple. So you are forced to sit in the background and continue being marginalized. So, which is not a good place to be. It's a taxing way to live, to be in the closet, to not live your authentic self.
But don't you think there's more acceptance now than it was before? Because you were there at the onset of LGBTIQ back in 1998, right?
Yeah.
You were there.
Of formal organizing.
Correct. So have things changed in 14 years in terms of acceptance?
I think I would say that social media has brought the world, has made the world a bit smaller in terms of how these issues are discussed and the information, disseminating the information to the wider public, discussing what the issues are. Because I know also there's a perception that, it's a membership or there's some conversion. There's nothing like that. It's just discussing what the issues are, because how I identify and who I live, like Nick, you said, it's not an issue. That is not an issue. But the issue is when certain laws are used to discriminate against this community, then our economy suffers, our people suffer, our citizens suffer. You and I, we're citizens of the same country, I'm assuming.
I'm part Belgian, but continue.
Oh, yeah. You're still part Kenyan. So we are citizens of the same country. We share the same rights. We live under the same constitution. We choose, our leaders, the way we choose them, under the same laws. So these are sometimes rights that are taken away from marginalized communities like the LGBTIQ community. Access to work. It's wide-ranging.
Why doesn't the community just start their own companies where you can all work together there?
Let's say you've been expelled from school because they've assumed you're either gay or bisexual, whatever it is. Because anyone can accuse you of anything. People have, human beings have a constant when it comes to click of an eye.
Yeah.
Someone can decide we're not friends anymore and decide I'm going to label you as this because this is what will harm you the most, or I'm going to say this about you because this is what will harm you the most. This has happened, whether you're straight or gay or whatever, it has happened. So someone can say this one is gay, kick them out of school. Then you go to your parents' house and they think you're the devil's child and you've embarrassed them and you've embarrassed them in society to their friends.
Is there a lot of mental health issues when it comes to the LGBTIQ community?
Yes, there are a lot of mental health issues. Basically, because of the discrimination, because of the abuse, there's a lot of mental health and very few psychologists, psychiatrists, or counselors who know how to articulate and deal with these issues. Some are very judgmental. We've had cases where psychiatrists or psychologists or counselors have told someone, but why don't you just become straight? That's not how
it works.
It works.
Okay, now explain to us, how does, because sometimes I hear people who used to be straight, then they just said, let me cross over. Then they started that life. I'd really like to understand where it comes from. Some people say you're born with it. Other people just start having the feeling when they're a bit older. And like for me, I accept the lesbian community. Hapa kwa guys ndio kidogo napiga breaks.
So you're asking for an explanation of...
I would like to understand how, because I don't know. I feel like some people just convert. Now from your side, you explain to us.
So I think number one,
I know I sounded judgmental there.
Yes, you did.
I saw the way you rolled your eyes.
I think so, and I need to do this because I feel that there's so much information out there on the internet, where you can learn some of these things if you're interested in knowing some of what the issues are, and what the identities are, and how to respect people with how they identify.
Yeah.
And our organization, Open for Business, we're not here. We work with companies that actually have already shown interest in engaging in this conversation. It's not where we are going to companies to tell them this is how you should treat. We're not teaching, and we're not asking for acceptance. We're laying down what the issues are, how these issues affect the economy, what that figure is, and how then do companies engage in this space.
How do you get people to accept you for who you are? For the most part, I mean, it takes education at the end of the day. It takes education. But a lot of people are very ignorant.
So there are many organizations that do that. There are many CSOs that actually take time to provide training, to provide knowledge on these issues. But at the end of the day, I always like saying it's just about treating another person as a human being and not as a thing that needs to be removed from society or needs to be changed. So yeah, there's CSOs out there that are doing the work to educate and to inform.
If someone was to ask you, what's the biggest challenge? The biggest challenge to someone from the LGBTIQ community, in everyday life, what's the biggest challenge?
The biggest challenge is our colonial penal codes. Penal codes that we inherited from Colonial-era, because being a lesbian, being a bisexual, being a transgender has always existed in Africa from way back before colonialists came to this land. So the challenge is these penal codes that are used then to discriminate, and that are used to introduce things like homosexual people should not be in boarding school, children should not be in boarding school, or this new law that
they
gay
found
couples,
guilty.
Cannot adopt, or such things. So those laws create a gap where people in specific positions of power can use to discriminate against you, to abuse you, whether it's physically, mentally. And those are some of the major issues. Health issues, access to economic freedom sometimes becomes challenging, especially if you present in a certain way that society thinks no, this is not how you should present. So some of these are the major issues that are experienced by the community.
And the Constitution doesn't protect?
The Constitution actually does protect, because I have freedoms. I have rights. So the Constitution does protect us in certain ways, but there are clauses also within the penal codes that are the ones that are used to discriminate against the community. And those are some of the things that we're challenging.
What kind of support do you look for?
So we look for companies to actually challenge or engage, not challenge, but engage in advancing some of these rights, because companies have economic leverage. They have a lot of economic power. Plus, they also employ a majority of the nation, so they have a lot of the citizenship within their walls. So when CSOs go to these companies, they're talking to about 50 people at a go. But also, support comes in engaging in discussions around LGBTIQ inclusion with whatever spaces that they access, because sometimes, as Yvonne, I might not have access to someone, a policy maker, but a CEO or a director at a company will have access to that. The
way you're expressing yourself, it's like you all live in a very fearful society. That's how it's coming across.
Some people do, but the reason I'm saying this is because the issue, let me explain. So I remember President Uhuru said that this is a non-issue in our country. And to some point, for me, that is true. It is an issue. What the issue is the suicide rates. Reporting cases to the police. How do I say my partner has, there's domestic violence in my home, my partner is beating me. How do I approach that issue? When I go to hospital, how do I, there's this whole issue of anal testing and all that. How do you approach such issues when the doctors are calling each other so that they look at you like you're a fish in an aquarium? So those are the issues that are there. So yes, there are in some situations, it's extremely hard for people to be out because of all these issues. We've seen a trans person being beaten in the streets. So yes, there's that living in fear, but there's also the freedom that we also enjoy, that we are bold enough to live out freely. But that is also privilege. That is you, because you're in you're in a safe space, so to speak, within your friendships, within your family, within the community that you live in. You're in that safe space. There are people who don't enjoy that.
So like 2022, what is the plan?
So we've just launched the Nairobi Declaration. This is just a basic statement that companies are endorsing. And this declaration basically states that our companies believe in inclusion. We do not discriminate regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, race, disability, because you can't alienate. Just because I'm here speaking about LGBTIQ issues, that does not mean I do not realize that there are other ways in which I'm discriminated. It's all intersectional.
Yes.
So I'm discriminated as a woman. I'm discriminated as a person, as a gay, as a lesbian, let's say, or bisexual or trans person. These issues I experience within myself. In one, I'm probably discriminated because of my tribe or because of my ability or disability. So I experience all these things as one person. So these companies have come together and said, we realize that this is a big issue. We realize that this is an economic issue. And for our businesses to thrive, we need to be wholly inclusive. And that's basically what the Nairobi Declaration is.
Talk to parents of children who are living or who are in that community, because I feel like that's the first place where someone needs acceptance/inclusion before you can decide to conquer the world out there. And I mean, making sense, because if your mom and dad are already pulling you down, how will you go out there? So maybe talk to the parents. What would you tell a parent who has just found out their son is either lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans? What's the first conversation you'd have with them?
I think allow your children to live their authentic selves. Allow them to focus on their education by not being abusive, by not seeming like you're rejecting who they are. So allow them to finish their education so that they build a society that is economically flourishing, so that they go get good jobs or start good companies. So allow them to be who they are. Allow them to live an authentic life.
Let me ask you now, like when you see a handsome man like me, you don't feel your heart beating, for example?
You did.
You digress too much.
Are you going to answer him?
No.
No, we still have 2 minutes of the interview left, so